Good afternoon. The board meeting of the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey and its component units is now called to order. Due to challenges related to the ongoing COVID pandemic, the attendance at today's meeting has been restricted or limited to commissioners and Port Authority staff required to conduct the meetings and credentialed members of the media, subject to capacity limitations. For all others, obviously, we're teleconferencing this live and live streaming it from the Port Authority website. On November 4th, the Committees of Audit and Finance met in executive session. Earlier today, the Committees on Capital Planning, Execution and Asset Management met in public. The Committees of Finance and Audit met jointly in executive session, and the Committees on Finance and Operations met jointly in executive session as well. Their reports will be filed with the official minutes of today's board's meetings. The Commissioners also met in executive early today to discuss ongoing negotiations or reviews of contracts or proposals, matters related to the purchase, sale, or lease of real property where disclosure would affect the value thereof or the public interest, and matters related to personnel and personnel procedures. At this time, we asked to hear from our Executive Director on his monthly report. Rick?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm pleased to report to the board that during the past month, Port Authority facilities have continued to operate at a high standard, and I want to take this opportunity to thank, as I usually do, profoundly the employees of the Port Authority for their dedication, commitment, and hard work in operating our facilities, particularly with the continuing overhang of the pandemic. You will shortly hear an update on the financial performance of the agency and the proposed budget for 2022 from our CFO. I want to declare to the board I think it is a fiscally responsible budget. It is fully capable of supporting the restoration of agency activity in support of the increasing volumes of travelers as the recovery from the pandemic proceeds. I'm also proud that you will hear a description of our proposed net zero policy. It is our continuing effort to act as a responsible environmental system and to respond appropriately to the existential climate crisis. Now I want to turn to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic and its effect on the volumes at our facilities. Headlines are the following. Volume activity this month at Aviation and PATH, which have been the two facilities slowest to recover from the pandemic, saw a bit of an uptick, hitting their highest weekly volume since the beginning of the pandemic, though both still remained significantly down from pre-COVID levels. Vehicular traffic at the tunnels and bridges remained close to pre-COVID levels, and the seaport in October continued to show great strength. Let me provide some additional details. At our airports for the week of November 8th to 14th, passenger volumes were down 23% compared to the pre-COVID November 2019 average. These numbers do, however, reflect an increase from the last few months where volumes were between 30 and 40% down compared to pre-COVID levels. At PATH for the week of November 8th to 14th, PATH ridership was down 48% compared to the pre-COVID November 2019 average, and this marks the first week since the start of the pandemic that ridership reached 50%, more than 50% of 2019 pre-COVID levels, and that was an approximate 5% increase from the level of the last few months. At our bridges and tunnels for the week of November 8th to 14th, the volume continues to remain very close to pre-COVID levels, but specifically down approximately 2.5%. At the port in October 2021, volumes were up nearly 20%, 19.6 to be precise, compared to October 2019, and this represents the highest ever monthly volume for the seaport and marks 14 consecutive months of record monthly volumes. And I'm also pleased to report to the board that our seaport is not seeing the same congestion delays for container cargo ships that are being seen elsewhere around the country. With respect to our workforce, in the past 30 days, 61 employees reported positive test results for COVID-19. That was an increase from 52 last month. There are currently 105 employees in self-quarantine, but that is down from 121 a month ago. We continue to focus on protecting the health and safety of the agency's employees. And as you know, a key step in that focus has been the institution of a weekly testing protocol following guidance from both New York and New Jersey. That testing protocol is in effect for all unvaccinated employees at the agency. We are currently testing approximately 2,200 employees per week. To date, 34 cases of asymptomatic positive test results have been reported, and those employees have moved to quarantine, protective quarantine. Additionally, 400 employees, slightly more, have submitted vaccine documentation who had previously not done so, and so we now estimate that roughly 75% of the agency's workforce has been vaccinated, and we continue to encourage those who are unvaccinated to get vaccinated. Updates on two specifics. We made the announcement earlier this week about the LaGuardia Air Train Alternatives Review. As you know, Governor Hochul requested a review of potential alternative mass transit options to LaGuardia Airport. The agency has begun that review following our public announcement last week that the project will be on pause until that review is completed and submitted to the governor. We announced on Tuesday that the Port Authority has appointed a panel of world-renowned independent transportation experts as part of our effort to run a high quality and fully high quality review. These experts are Mike Brown, former Commissioner of Transport for London and former Managing Director of Heathrow Airport; Jeanette Sadiq Khan, currently Principal at Bloomberg Associates and a former Commissioner of the New York City Department of Transportation; and Philip Washington, the CEO of Denver International Airport and former CEO of Los Angeles Metro. In addition to these leading transportation voices, the Metropolitan Transit Authority, the MTA, will be a key participant in the analysis of mass transit options, specifically with respect to the subway and bus alternatives that are on the table. We also emphasized in our announcement the breadth of the options that will be analyzed. The review will include, at a minimum, an evaluation of improved and expanded bus service, including potential for dedicated lanes, ferry service, one-system rides, including subway extension options, elevated guideway options, including light rail from various Long Island Railroad and subway stops. We will also have a particular focus on other new and emerging technologies that might be pursued and implemented in the near term. The final report will be completed as expeditiously as possible and will be made public upon completion. Finally, I do want to stress the net zero policy that our Chief Development Officer will be presenting to you shortly. I'm very proud of the new proposed policy. On October 28th, the agency announced that we will become, the board approves, the first U.S. transportation agency to embrace both a net zero greenhouse gas emission target for 2050, as well as embracing the Biden administration's interim 50% greenhouse gas reduction target by the new date of 2030. This policy is on the board's agenda, and you will shortly hear about it in more detail. As you know, in 2018, the agency was the first transit agency in the U.S. to embrace the Paris Climate Accords, even as the federal government was withdrawing from them. The 2030 reductions will be achieved by redirecting more than $1 billion of spending between now and 2030 away from high carbon options to low carbon options for goods, services, and other purchases, and also through the implementation of multiple other emission-reducing initiatives. All parts of the agency will be involved in carrying out this commitment. We are proud to bring it to the board for action, and we believe it is a moral imperative as a response to the climate crisis. Mr. Chairman, with that, I conclude my report.
Thank you, Executive Director. And as Commissioner Richardson said in the earlier meeting about, she's exhausted just listening to the litany of things that you and the other senior staff have talked about in terms of the laboring oars that have been going on the last few months. It's been an extraordinary year. Rick, there's 43 days left of this year that, we're obviously throwing the pedal to the metal. Lots of things need to be done and closed out November, December, Rick. You've done an incredible job of keeping the team together, focused, and there hasn't been one meeting over the last year, 4 years, that has been inconsequential. They have been all significant. When you talk about, the broad strokes of net zero, that in and of itself is just groundbreaking. It is unbelievable to say that we're going to be the first transportation agency to embrace that, much like we did back in 17. We came on board with the Paris Accord. So I'm excited, Rick, that we have just come to the end, November, December. This board has worked very well together with you and your top leadership. Looking forward to finishing this year very strong. Looking forward to having a year in review in December to talk about the things that we've accomplished. Thank those who have really, really done amazing stuff, and obviously project what we have looking down in terms of our agenda, our challenging agenda for 2022. So,
well, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I would point out that what this agency does is truly a team sport, and that there is no other way to move these balls forward without the extraordinary talents of the senior staff, of their colleagues in management, but also extraordinarily importantly of the represented staff of the agency who are on the front lines every day. And that is what allows us to move projects forward, as you've referenced. So thank you.
Great. Commissioners, any comments or questions for Rick and his report? All righty, thanks, Rick. Next up, Libby, you're back up. Let's talk about the preliminary overview of the draft 2022 budget, which will be posted on the Port Authority website for public comment, and which we will be looking to adopt in December. Libby, is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chairman,
Great.
That's correct.
The floor is yours.
Thank you. And good afternoon, Commissioners. Today I am pleased to present the proposed 2022 budget in advance of its posting later today. This has been a challenging budget to put together, given the impacts of COVID as well as the recovery that we're seeing in our activity levels. And I want to thank the whole organization for working collaboratively as led by Eric George and the MBD group in putting this proposal together. So. The proposed 2022 budget totals $7.9 billion, and it consists of $3.4 billion of operating expenses, $2.7 billion for annual capital spending, and $1.8 billion for debt service and deferred expenses. These amounts are built off of the significant reductions made in the 2021 austerity budget as a result of the adverse impacts of COVID-19. This proposed budget is supported by the ongoing activity recovery across our facilities, with increased revenues funding the key spending categories that are listed here, which I'll go into in just a few minutes. I do want to note that although the proposed 22 budget spending is supported by that substantial increase in projected revenues resulting from the agency's ongoing recovery, this proposed budget is well below pre-pandemic projections as COVID-19 continues to have adverse impacts on our agency's financial position. This slide shows the proposed 2022 budget sources that will fund the proposed uses, with the primary sources being gross operating revenues and bond proceeds. Moving on to how is it that this was developed and the impacts of COVID. So overall, the proposed budget is shaped by COVID-19, the COVID-19 pandemic, and while the proposed budget reflects an increase in alignment with the projected ongoing activity recovery, these amounts continue to reflect constrained resources as COVID continues to impact our financial position and cash flow. Significantly, 2022's projected revenues include gross operating revenues and passenger facility charges are $400 million below our pre-COVID 22 projections. And while port container and bridge and tunnel vehicular activity are projected to be above pre-COVID 2019 levels, aviation and PATH activity volumes are projected to remain below 2019 levels throughout 2022. I'll also note that while the Port Authority anticipates receiving some federal support from the airport provisions of the federal infrastructure bill, this proposed budget does not rely on such funding, as the agency cannot yet accurately forecast the amount of that support. These next two slides show the impact of COVID-19 on the agency activity volumes for the 2019 through 2022 projections. On this slide here, you can see the activity volumes for the port containers on the left and bridge and tunnel vehicular activity on the right. For reference, the yellow dotted line is 2019 activity levels, and the solid blue lines is the actual or projected amounts. As you can see, the seaports were less impacted by COVID-19 and have been reporting record volumes to date as they continue to move essential goods throughout the region and across the world. Containers are projected to be 12% or over 2019 levels in 2022. The bridge and tunnels have recently reached 2019 activity levels and are expected to remain at or above these levels into 2022. This slide shows our facilities that are experiencing a slower recovery, with aviation passengers on the left and PATH riders on the right. Aviation passengers are projected to continue to recover in 2022, with the full year at 126 million passengers, or 90% of 2019 levels. PATH is projected to have a strong recovery in 2022, getting to 68 million riders, which is 83% of 2019 levels. And now how that impacts our gross operating revenues. Here you can see that gross operating revenues are projected to increase by $635 million, or 12%, versus the 2021 budget. This is reflecting that growth off of the unprecedented declines in 2020 and 2021, which we showed on those prior slides. Overall, this growth is driven by our activity-based revenues, including bridge and tunnel tolls and fares, aviation-based percentage rentals and parking, and PATH fares, as I said. Toll rates for autos and trucks, as well as PATH fares, remain unchanged in 2022. A bus toll rate increase pursuant to the September 2019 board action that adopted scheduled increases will take place in January of 22. And an AirTrain fare increase of 25 cents effective in January of 22 will also take place pursuant to the automatic inflation adjustment adopted by the Board of Commissioners in 2019. So with this context on the ongoing recovery from COVID-19 pandemic that we set, this is how we set the proposed spending budget, which consists of the operating expenses, annual capital expenditures, and the debt service. And I'm going to walk through each. So this slide shows the proposed 2022 operating expense budget of totaling $3.4 billion, and it reflects a core increase of $211 million, or 6.6%. As a reminder, the 2021 austerity budget reduced headcount by 626 positions and carried forward approximately $190 million of cost reductions implemented in 2020, in addition to further cost reductions that were necessary to offset contractual and structural increases elsewhere. This proposed core budget holds headcount flat to the reduced 2021 levels and provides for inflation-based growth for labor and contracts, non-discretionary contractual increases for the 5-year rent reset for the land underlying our 3 major airports and the New Jersey seaports, and targeted incremental spending to prudently restore resources reduced as a result of lower activity volumes at the height of the pandemic. Making incremental security investments, including additional cybersecurity protections and funding for 2 new police classes in anticipation of retirements, and to invest in new projects and initiatives guided by our priorities and standards, including innovative demonstration projects, sustainability initiatives to advance the agency's new net zero commitments, and revenue-generating and customer experience projects. In addition to the proposed 2022 operating expense budget, it also incorporates an additional $41 million of non-core operating expenses that are either non-recurring expenses that are completely reimbursed from third parties, such as federal reimbursement of the employee COVID-19 testing and reimbursement for services requested by the New York State Department of Transportation, or expenses funded through the 2022 capital spending budget, but due to accounting standards are required to be included in operating expenses, primarily for the airport redevelopment and traffic mitigation efforts. Moving on to the capital spending budget, the proposed 2022 capital spending budget of $2.7 billion reflects an increase of $316 million or 13% versus the 2021 austerity budget. This proposed budget phases in additional spending in a fiscally prudent manner from the reduced spending levels in 2020 and 2021 that were necessary as a result of the adverse impacts of COVID-19. This proposed 2022 capital spending budget advances the agency's pre-pandemic commitment to rebuilding the region's aging infrastructure. It's important to note that this proposed spending plan is still 24% below what was originally envisioned in for 2022 in the 2017 through 2026 capital plan. And finally, the last component of the budget is our debt service and deferred expenses. The proposed debt service budget of totaling $1.6 billion reflects an increase of $22 million versus the 21 budget. That's driven by scheduled borrowing that will fund the capital program. So for next steps in continuation of the Port Authority's commitment to the highest standards of accountability and transparency and in line with best practices, the proposed 2022 budget will be available for public review and comment on the Port Authority's website following this meeting. The public is requested to submit written comments by December 10th by visiting the Port Authority's website, and written and video comments can also be submitted for the December 16th board meeting. These comments will be considered by staff and the board in advance of the December 16th board meeting, where we will seek adoption of the budget. And that concludes my remarks, Mr. Chairman, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Great, Libby. First of all, thank you and your staff, and we say this, and I'm not so sure thank you is really enough. This has been the most challenging of the years that I have been here. We've called upon you and your staff repeatedly in dealing with the challenges this year of reduction of $400 million in revenue, dealing with trying to just make sense of what the falling volumes and the projections that were really hard to read back in January and February coming together now and having a budget that is doable and having a capital plan that is manageable is extraordinary, to say the least. So thank you to each and every one of your staffers who have brought us to this point. We look forward to having a more detailed discussion when we vote on this in December. But I just wanted to acknowledge that there is a recognition about just how much work, and it's not just the budget. There are several other projects I tend to hear that you're working on right now that have required a lot of time, and it is not lost on us how much you personally and others have dedicated.
Thank you very much.
Any commissioners have any comments or questions? And we're going to push this to a vote, obviously, in December. Anyone else? All righty.
Thank you.
Thank you. And as Libby indicated, the budget will be posted on the website for public comments, and we look forward to hearing from everybody before our next meeting. For our next order of business, our Chief Development Officer, Derek Utter, will present for consideration an item expanding the Port Authority's commitment to addressing the climate crisis and with the proposed adoption of the net zero policy that would reduce greenhouse gas emissions at our facilities. Derek?
Thank you, Chairman, and good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm here today to seek adoption of a new policy, which Rick, the Executive Director, alluded to set a higher, more ambitious goal for greenhouse gas reductions, but also to hold ourselves accountable to specific, tangible, measurable steps down that path. So as was referenced before, in 2018, the Port Authority adopted new sustainability targets. We embraced the Paris Climate Accords. We were the first U.S. transportation agency to do so, And in doing so, we committed to reducing our greenhouse gas emissions by 35% from a baseline at 2006 by 2025. And that's for our direct emissions, and we are currently on path to do that. We also adopted a goal of 80% reduction for both our indirect and direct emissions by 2050. Indirect emissions are things like aircraft emissions or vehicles going over our bridges and through our tunnels. Direct emissions are directly emitted by our own actions, our own things that we operate each day. We also approved 12 new initiatives to reduce Port Authority emissions, and we termed those the Clean Dozen, and I'll give you a quick update on where we stand with those. So the challenge is clear. You see this in the headlines every day. You pick up the paper, you see what's going on in Glasgow, you see what's going on with the science. The Earth is warming faster, and so the threat is clear. What's changed in the last couple of years is the Biden administration now is reasserting leadership. And so across the board, there is a whole of government approach, meaning every agency now has an effort to reduce greenhouse gases and to address the challenge of climate change. So what is net zero? That's a lot of jargon, and you hear the name, but what exactly does net zero mean? Net zero refers to a state in which greenhouse gas emissions are eliminated or offset. And what that means for us, it's actually a pretty clear path to net zero. All vehicles become electric vehicles. Buildings become more energy efficient. We use on-site solar, which we're doing a bunch of solar projects right now. The grid power produced off-site also becomes all from renewable sources. And the thing that's hardest for us to ultimately crack, the hardest nut for us to crack, or at least our partners, are the emissions from aircraft and ships. But there are big initiatives around those, and we do have some of the global leaders using our facilities every day, and therefore very ripe for partnerships. And that's one of the big opportunities that we have. Because we are a convening force for a lot of global leaders, we really have an opportunity to work with some of the biggest players in the world. The proposed action that we're suggesting would include 4 components. The first would be to reaffirm our interim target of 35% reduction by 2025 for emissions under our direct control. The second would be to establish a new interim target of 50% reduction by 2030 rather, also for emissions under our direct control. The third would be to raise our target for 2020 or 2050 to be net zero, not just an 80% reduction for all emissions, direct and indirect. And the fourth would be to adopt 12 new initiatives that again would be tangible, near-term steps that we could be measured by. Just to give a quick accounting for where we stand on the 2018 Clean Dozen, they're listed here on the screen. The column on the right shows the status. Those in green have been completed, and those in blue are in progress. They fall into four major categories. So electrification, renewable energy, sustainable buildings and energy efficiency, and then partnerships. And again, partnerships are very important for us. So I won't go through each of these, but you can see some of the key initiatives that we have made progress on, including transitioning our airport shuttle bus fleet to all electric. The light duty vehicle fleet the Port Authority has to be on track towards 50% of the light duty vehicles being electric models. You'll see we have already completed a fast charging hub for the for-hire vehicles and taxis at JFK. You'll see we've undertaken a number of solar and fuel cell initiatives, and we're making steady progress on energy efficiency, things like lighting and heating and ventilation and air conditioning retrofits at our facilities to improve the energy efficiency. The new proposed Clean Dozen has a series of initiatives in similar categories: electrification, renewables, energy efficiency, and partnerships, but they go much further. And so you'll see these initiatives listed here. For example, in electrification, we are going to adopt an airport policy for zero emissions ground support equipment. These are the tugs that pull the aircraft back from the gates. This is actually a big deal. It's a big deal because these are diesel-powered equipment traditionally, and we're now in the process of beginning the transition towards electric vehicles with charging stations at the gates, and we have a clear path towards transitioning over a series of years to an all zero emissions ground support equipment. In a similar vein at the ports, cargo handling equipment will also transition to zero emissions over a period of time through a new port policy. You'll see we're also adding additional electric shuttle buses. We're targeting now 100% of our own fleet to become electric. And importantly, number 6, we're going to announce a approach next year, and we're starting with a request for information, sort of seeking industry feedback, to develop a strategy to electrify, we call all electric everything, which means not only our own equipment, but also vehicles that use Port Authority facilities over a period of years to become electric, to provide incentives to work closely with the industry leaders so that we have a path towards electrification of our vehicles and others that use our facilities. In renewable energy, we have a series of other new initiatives to build more solar facilities at our facilities and to work closely with industry leaders around sustainable aviation fuel. In fact, we just put out a report that outlines how that would work. In the area of energy efficiency, we continue to work closely with our internal teams and line departments to ensure that we address every opportunity we can see. And number 12, you'll see that we have a vision for the new Port Authority bus terminal to be a net zero building, which would be groundbreaking and would accommodate an all-electric bus fleet. So really thinking forward in how we think about the new bus terminal. Every line department will have initiatives, so this will be somewhat like the Biden administration says, a whole of government approach. This will be a whole of agency approach where every department is actively involved. As Rick calls this is a team sport. So again, the request today is that we ask commissioners to adopt a new net zero policy for a commitment by 2050 to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from Port Authority facilities, and a new 2030 goal of 50% reduction, which is consistent with the Biden administration's goals. And then again, to launch a new series of initiatives to help demonstrate that we are making progress down these paths and to hold ourselves accountable. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Great, thank you very much. Questions from the commissioners, comments? Anyone? All righty, motion, please. I'm sorry, we'll defer. All right, anything else, Derek?
Nope, that's it. Thank you.
Great. All right, in terms of our speakers program, we've received 5 written statements, which will be filed with the transcripts of today's board meeting and posted on the Port Authority website after the meeting. In addition, we've received 15 video statements, which we'll be seeing shortly. I'll point out that of the 5 written statements, one of the 5, as I understand it, relates to the net zero item, which is before the board today. Is that accurate?
One of the 15 video statements, yes.
One of the 15 have it of the 5 written?
None of the 5 written relate to
Net zero or any of the board items? Okay. All right, let's see the videos.
My name is Betsaida Rodriguez, and I work at Brown Aviation at Newark Airport. I'm also a member of 32BJ SEIU. My union spent years fighting for better wages and benefits at the airport. We finally have got good wages, employer-paid health care, and protection on the job. I recently learned that Amazon is taking over the building that I work in, and we don't know what this means to us. They said we might not be working inside the airport anymore. What happens to us? Where will we work? Will we lose our benefits? We demand protection for our jobs, our benefits, and the rights that we won with our union.
Hello, I am Todd Fine of the Coalition for a 100% affordable World Trade Center Tower 5. The commercial design guidelines promulgated by Studio Daniel Libeskind for the World Trade Center in 2007 were quite open-ended. They were flexible about the specific design of the buildings. They mostly regulated their height and their relation to the September 11th memorial. Indeed, there isn't very many explicit regulations about the materials or the massing at all, except for World Trade Center 1 and its motif of the Statue of Liberty. The plans actually, if they do assume materials, they assume metal and glass, not masonry and glass, as is being discussed with 5 World Trade Center. Never is the very specific massing of a building discussed in those commercial guidelines of 2007, like are proposed in these general project plan changes for World Trade Center 5, which has extensive detail about the specific levels of the podium, about the rounded corners of the building, about the type of masonry and glass, et cetera, et cetera. Very specific design document issues, totally separate from what the Libeskind plan envisioned. It's a repurposing of the Libeskind plan, no longer to create a beautiful World Trade Center that is unified or has an architectural message, but rather it becomes a political document, a legal document, to constrain the ability to build more affordable housing at World Trade Center and to lock in, before a contract is signed, a specific design by Larry Silverstein and Brookfield Properties. But it won't work. It represents the last gasp of an attempt to institute a corporate monoculture architecture to the World Trade Center and to exclude the public demands for more affordable housing. The Port Authority can be the hero here. It can work with all of the elected officials at the state, local, federal level who want 5 World Trade Center to be a fully affordable building, to be an affordable building, and can help compensate the Port Authority and help do something that does justice to the first responders, the 9/11 survivors, the people in this community who have suffered so much in the last several years. Please listen. Do not pass a general project plan and cheapen this Libeskind's design into a transparent legal document to serve these designated developers. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Rachel Foss, and I'm the Senior Research Analyst for reInvent Albany. We advocate for more transparent and accountable New York government, including for authorities like the MTA and Port Authority. I am pre-recording comments for the Port Authority's Board of Directors meeting on Thursday, November 16th, 2021. First, we ask the Port Authority to improve its public comment process by following the best practice of the public providing real-time comment both in person and remotely for your board meetings. This hybrid approach is currently being used by the MTA for its board meetings and is working well for the public and being managed effectively by MTA staff. The Port Authority's process of making the public record their comments and email a video file to the Port Authority 2 days in advance of Port Authority meetings is an unnecessary barrier for the public, and also means that the comment is not timely, and a lot can happen in 2 days. Additionally, the Port Authority does not publish written comments received from the public on its website for those who do not opt to share video or cannot share video. Second, we would like to bring to your attention a letter sent by reInvent Albany and other civic and transit groups to Governor Hochul asking that the LaGuardia Transit Access Initiative be a fully joint project between the Port Authority and Metropolitan Transportation Authority, the MTA. Any solution that will thoroughly examine alternative mass transit solutions as envisioned by Governor Hochul is inevitably going to involve MTA bus and/or subway services. An airport access project that builds on existing transit networks is most likely to increase mobility across the city and region, attract more airport employees and passengers, and provide the largest environmental and congestion benefits. Lastly, another favor of a joint MTA Port Authority initiative is the FAA rule revision in early 2021, stating that rail lines that do not exclusively serve the airport are now eligible to be funded by passenger facility charges. The LGA AirTrain project began in 2017 under old FAA rules that restricted passenger charges to transit projects that solely serve the airport and should be reconsidered in light of this change. Thank you for your consideration.
My name is Kevin Brown, and I'm the Executive Vice President and New Jersey State Director of 32BJ SEIU. I'm providing testimony regarding the lease agreement between Amazon Global Air and the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey at Newark Liberty International Airport. 32BJ represents more than 10,000 mostly Black and immigrant airport workers across JFK, LaGuardia, and Newark Liberty International Airport. We also represent workers who currently work in cargo buildings 339 and 340 at Newark, the buildings that Amazon Global Air is planning to lease, redevelop, and operate. The Port Authority should include a labor harmony clause in all its agreements with Amazon Global Air for their operations at Newark Liberty. In addition, the port should require Amazon to include labor harmony provisions in any of Amazon's contracts, including those with a lessee or sublessee for the provision of labor services on port property. Promoting labor harmony is in the public's best interest, as it will serve to encourage cooperative labor relations at airport facilities and will help to limit disruptions to the efficient operations of such facilities. In addition, a labor harmony clause that aims to reduce disruptions during the transition of entities providing labor services will promote the retention of experienced employees with a knowledge of the airport environment and its particular needs. Labor harmony provisions are especially necessary for companies like Amazon, where, over the last few years, Amazon warehouse workers all over the country have staged work stoppages because of poor working conditions. Amazon has a troubling record of workers' rights violations. According to a December 2019 report written by various workers' rights groups, injury rates at Amazon facilities are 3 times as high as the injury rate across other private employers, and more than twice as high as the injury rate in the general warehousing industry. Earlier this year, Amazon agreed to pay the Federal Trade Commission $61.7 million to settle charges that it failed to pay Amazon Flex drivers the full amount of their tips that they received over a 2.5-year period. With a company that has a well-publicized labor operating record at Newark Airport, it's in the best interest of the port to require labor harmony for all of Amazon's operations at port property in order to minimize the impact of labor-related disruptions. We'd like to thank the Port Authority Board for the opportunity to provide testimony on this important matter. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Mohammed Isekande. I've been a Teamster for 9 years, and I've been living in Newark for 15 years, and I'm a father of 5. And I heard about Amazon coming to the airport, putting their out in Newark Airport. My main concern is the pollution, the traffic for my kids. And I would like to ask the Port Authority if they can stop the project for the community. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Amy Goldsmith. I'm the New Jersey State Director for Clean Water Action. I also am a member of the steering committee of the Coalition for Healthy Ports. I'm speaking on behalf of people concerned in the community about the diesel pollution that is chronically being emitted throughout the port area. I'm particularly concerned about the resolution that is being considered today. While it's laudable that the executive director and the board want to speak to and have made pledges in the past to reducing climate emissions, the resolution does not mandate nor set clear benchmarks for achieving those goals. In particular, the concern that I have about adopting a net zero policy is that it talks about reducing emissions, which is a good thing. It talks about removing emissions, but really what it's doing is offsetting those emissions somewhere, maybe not in the community, but somewhere in the world or in the universe. Net zero is not a strategy that gets us to where we need to go. It basically is a postponement and a delay of a lack of really addressing the issue and crisis, climate crisis of the day. It also involves carbon trading, which Clean Water Action and its environmental justice partners oppose. All that carbon trading does is trade off pollution in one location for another, often to the detriment of community members in already excessively overburdened communities, which are largely port-adjacent, Black and brown and low-income and immigrant communities who are, again, already overburdened. We oppose carbon trading. We believe that offsets is basically an accounting trick and does not really avoid actual decarbonization. We also do not support use of negative emission technologies as the main strategy for reducing emissions. In fact, it's used mostly to delay and to continue polluting rather than reducing. Negative emission technologies is the idea of just sucking pollution out of the air removing the carbon or carbon sequestration, but it doesn't actually put a moratorium or stop the burning of fossil fuels in the logistics industry or anywhere else. We need clear mandates for carbon emission reductions. We need quantifiable, verifiable strategies and roadmap to spiral down carbon emissions. We don't need just CO2, but NOx and other short-lived methane and black carbon, which the port emits huge amounts of today. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak about our concerns regarding the health impacts on the proposed Amazon Air Regional Hub. My name is Winifred Victor Hines, a Newark resident. I am also co-chair of the Newark Environmental Commission and the executive director of the Weequahic Park Association. It is unfortunate that Port Authority Board Chair Kevin O'Toole and Executive Director Richard Cotton are choosing to disregard precedents of past joint efforts between the community and the Port Authority to engage in dialogue. There are examples whereby various organizations and community members have been willing to and actually have collaborated with port stakeholders on issues pertaining to environmental investments and initiatives in order to implement the improvements needed to mitigate the pollutants and tough working conditions our communities encounter on a regular basis. In the past, particularly with the Coalition for Healthy Ports, New Jersey, New York, the Aerotropolis proposal, and other issues, the Port Authority made the effort on various occasions to engage us in dialogue and hear our concerns. Now, those involved with this $432 million Amazon deal have deemed it inconsequential to include the community in the decision-making process, while obscuring their plans from public stakeholders. Having been part of some former negotiations with the Port Authority, we prefer to think that the Port Authority's values are more inclusive in its dealings with community engagement and more considerate of environmental justice and workers' rights. Consequently, we propose that the Port Authority make this project approval contingent upon a robust and transparent community engagement process, plus community benefit agreements that includes but is not limited to community input, which includes mandatory community hearings on the process held in the neighborhoods impacted by the airport hub. Conduct noise, traffic, and infrastructure studies. 2, we need to ensure that the environmental and health impact assessments must be used to guide and influence outcomes of the Airport Amazon Plan, not excluding enforceable benchmark for zero emissions at the facility and in transportation of goods. 3rd, the establishment of an advisory board including community stakeholders. 4th, we demand safe and healthy workplaces where workers have a voice, adequate wages and protections. And in closing, small business protections, whereby Amazon should provide funds for local small business support and relief effort. We really do hope that you make allowances, as you have in the past, for our proposal and legitimate concerns and right the wrongs when making your decisions. Thank you again for your time and consideration.
Hi, good morning. My name is Yambali Gomez. I am a resident of Newark, New Jersey, and I just want to say that I am deeply troubled by the lack of transparency and the lack of community input in the possible lease agreement with between Port Authority and Amazon for Amazon to expand into Newark Airport and create an airport hub. We do not know the environmental impact of this, but what we do know is that the significant truck and air traffic that this will bring to Newark and Elizabeth should be taken seriously by the Port Authority and should include input from the communities most affected. If the Port Authority truly cares about the environment and transparency, then it should reconsider this lease with Amazon. Also, Amazon is said to bring in 1,000 new jobs. And if this is true, then these jobs need to be good jobs, not only paying good wages, but that provide safety and stability that our communities deserve and that they need. Thank you so much for your time. Have a great day.
Hello, peace and blessings. My name is Victor Enoch Gavilanes. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to allow me to record a video and speak it today. I'm a resident from Essex County here in New Jersey. And I just want to say that, I stand against this Amazon building proposal. It's just too much at this moment. The city of Newark is growing, but right now, with all the industries that we already have that is plaguing the environment, that is, the amount of trucks that is coming through our neighborhoods that is polluting the air, city of Newark already deals with a lot, and, nothing against Amazon. It's good to always offer opportunities to residents in Newark to have a chance to work and stuff like that. That's cool, but nah. Amazon's already had, a bad rapport in many other states, in many other cities, and even labor issues as well. So, to bring that type of stress into Newark, along with the environmental issues, along with the pressure, into our neighborhoods with their trucks and stuff like that, it doesn't make sense. And it's kind of like a disrespect to residents when we have already said no, and you still slowly try to sneak your way into our cities by opening parking lots in certain areas of Newark and trying to get buildings built up, illegally. So it's unfortunate that we can't agree to stand together and have a great relationship, but try somewhere else. Newark is not the place. We don't want it. Sorry, and thank you for the opportunity. Bless.
Board members of the Port Authority. My name is George Boada. I'm a lifelong resident of Elizabeth, New Jersey. I'm here to express my concern over greenhouse gas emissions and poor quality air in my community. High standards should be enforced around our neighborhoods for clean air and greenhouse gases, which concern our community and our families. As a lifelong member of this community, I am aware of the poor quality in the air, and bringing this proposed hub here is only going to make it worse for our children and our families. Also, as a proud Teamster, Amazon touts they're bringing jobs. The jobs they bring are high turnover, low wages, and depreciate the standards of the industry. The community needs to be involved in this project. Their input must be taken into consideration, since we are the ones that are going to be primarily impacted by this development. We must be heard. We cannot be ignored in this process. The Port Authority must stop this process and take time to hear our concerns and address our concerns. Thank you very much.
Buenos días, mi nombre es Araiza y soy de Newark y tengo un niño de asma y no me gusta que te están abriendo un Amazon en el aeropuerto.
Buenos días, mi nombre es Nelly Torres y vengo a informarle que no estoy de acuerdo con la situación que hay sobre Amazon, debido a que yo soy una persona asmática y eso me va a afectar a mi salud y a las otras personas que sean asmáticas. Gracias y que pasen un bonito día.
Hola, mi nombre es Miguel, soy residente de la ciudad de Newark y estoy en contra del nuevo asentamiento de Amazon que va a estar ubicado a diagonal o al lado del aeropuerto internacional, el cual al asentarse el Amazon en este sector va a ocasionar mayor cantidad de flujo vehicular y eso va a crear un problema grande para nosotros los residentes y va a traer más contaminación en el medio ambiente también. Gracias.
Buenos días, mi nombre es Lorenza García y estoy representando a McEnroe, New Jersey, basada en Elizabeth, New Jersey. Estoy preocupada por la falta de transparencia y la falta de participación de la comunidad en el posible acuerdo de arrendamiento que la autoridad portuaria podría firmar con Amazon para que se expanda en el aeropuerto de Newark. El impacto ambiental de este acuerdo aún no se conoce, pero lo que sí sabemos es que el aumento de tráfico aéreo de camiones que esto traerá a Newark y a Elizabeth debe ser tomado en serio por la autoridad portuaria y debe incluir las comunidades más afectadas. Si la autoridad portuaria realmente se preocupa por el medio ambiente y la transparencia, entonces debería considerar este contrato de Amazon de arrendamiento con Amazon. Además, se dice que Amazon generará 1,000 trabajos nuevos. Y si eso es cierto, entonces estos trabajos deben ser buenos trabajos que no solo paguen buen salario, sino que brinden la seguridad y la estabilidad de nuestras comunidades, que nuestras comunidades merecen y necesitan. Gracias por su tiempo y espero que reconsidere este contrato con Amazon. Bye.
Yes.
Okay, we will now proceed with the voting on items for the board's consideration. Each of the respective committee chairs will provide a brief report prior to each of the matters being discussed today. As chair of the Committee on Operations, I will now present 2 items under the committee's purview. The first item would authorize an easement to accommodate an extension of the Highline Park over a portion of Port Authority property at Dyer Avenue between 30 and 31st Streets. Prior to making a motion, I'd ask the Secretary if there's any recusals from the Commissioners.
There are no recusals.
Okay, any Commissioners have a questions or comment on this item? Can I have a motion, please? So moved. Second, please.
Second.
Roll call.
Chairman O'Toole?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Linford?
Yes.
Commissioner Cohen?
Yes.
Commissioner Eve?
Yes.
Commissioner Horwitz?
Yes.
Commissioner LaBarbera?
Yes.
Commissioner Martinotti?
Yes.
Commissioner McCabe?
Yes.
Commissioner Menendez?
Yes.
Commissioner Richardson?
Yes.
Commissioner Rosado?
Yes.
Items approved. Next item with regard to the Chief Development Officer presented earlier today authorizes 2 critical policies to expand on our commitment in combating climate change by reducing emissions at our facilities. The first policy would commit the agency to a goal of achieving net zero greenhouse gas emissions of all emissions by 2050. The second policy would set an interim goal for the agency to reduce direct Port Authority greenhouse gas emissions in half by 2030. I ask the Board Secretary if there's any recusals.
There are no recusals.
Any questions or comments? Roll call, please.
Chairman
Motion-
O'Toole.
No, motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Roll call.
Chairman O'Toole?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Linford?
Yes.
Commissioner Cohen?
Yes.
Commissioner Eve?
Yes.
Commissioner Horwitz?
Yes.
Commissioner LaBarbera?
Yes.
Commissioner Martinotti?
Yes.
Commissioner McCabe?
Yes.
Commissioner Menendez?
Yes.
Commissioner Richardson?
Yes.
Commissioner Rosado?
Yes.
Votes are in order. This item has been approved. I ask the Vice Chair, may I have your report, please?
Thank you, Chairman. As Chair of the Committee on Capital Planning, Execution, and Asset Management, I will now report on an item under the committee's purview. The item which was presented at committee meeting earlier today authorizes a $99.4 million project, inclusive of $40.6 million of previously authorized expenditures to replace PATH's fare collection system. The new PATH fare payment system would allow customers to use open payment methods, including credit cards and mobile phones, at the turnstile to access the PATH system. This item also includes authorization of contracts to complete the design and implement action of the new system, and for the operation and maintenance services. Prior to making a motion on this item, I ask the Corporate Secretary to note any commissioner recusals.
There are no recusals.
Thank you. Do any commissioners have questions or comments on this item? Hearing no questions on this item, I request a motion.
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
I now request the Corporate Secretary to call the roll for voting on the item.
Chairman O'Toole?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Linford?
Yes.
Commissioner Cohen?
Yes.
Commissioner Eve?
Yes.
Commissioner Horwitz?
Yes.
Commissioner LaBarbera?
Yes.
Commissioner Martinotti?
Yes.
Commissioner McCabe?
Yes.
Commissioner Menendez? Commissioner Richardson? Commissioner Rosado?
Let's check with Commissioner Rosado later. I assume she's a yes. But let's check to make sure her mic or her IT is working. We've all had those problems.
She's on mute right now. Commissioner Rosado?
Yes.
Great. Thanks, Commissioner. Okay,
As the votes are in order, this item is approved, and I turn it back to our chairman.
sorry about that, Vice Chair. There being no further business here, I move to adjourn. May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting's adjourned. We'll see you in December.
Thank you. Having all the best with you.
Happy turkey.